My first encounter with Fauré piano music was actually with a piece that is written for piano and orchestra, the Ballade. Originally it was conceived as a solo piano piece, but Franz Liszt advised Fauré to make another version with orchestra. And this is the first thing I listened to as a teenager. And at that time I was listening to a lot of music, sight reading a lot of music, and I got passionate about this piece. I was amazed by its harmonic and melodic power, but it was too complicated for me to learn and play at that moment. So I just kept it in my heart, maybe for some time, I was thinking. But when I went back to studying the piano in my 20s, I remember before a lesson, I was waiting for my turn, and the previous student was still performing a piece I didn't know. So I was just asking myself, who wrote this piece? And I found out that it's Fauré who wrote this piece. So it was the first barcarolle. And just listening to this melody, very simple, almost a scale. It's so simple. But what Fauré does with it, how he combines it harmonically, rhythmically, how he puts some subtle dissonances in it, it reached my heart. And it was like entering a new musical world with new poisons, with new flavors. So this was, I would say this was the real shock I had, more than with the Ballade, because the Ballade for me was an incredible place to rest in my own musical world. But this barcarolle, I really felt like contaminated by this harmonic language that was not so familiar. I decided to record all Fauré music written for solo piano in 2020. I think that this year speaks to us in a quite depressing way because of this pandemic and these lockdowns. But for me, being locked at home gave me the opportunity to sight read. It's one of my passions, to spend hours sight reading scores at the piano. And usually with my pace of life, with the tours, with all the things I have to practice for my concerts, I don't have that much time to sight read new music. And funny enough, I never really sight read the whole corpus of pieces written by Fauré for solo piano. And at that time, I took the chance to go through all these pieces. And it was a shock to see how much beautiful is this music and how the whole corpus is, like, speaking about the quality is exceptional. Because, you know, when you go through the complete works of a composer, it might be that you fall on some pieces that are a bit less interesting, completely normal. But with Fauré, 57 pieces written for solo piano, and I could not find a weak one. And it's funny because I would never have thought to record the complete works of a composer. For this reason, I mentioned before, that I would not see myself just recording some pieces that are less interesting just for the sake of recording the old pieces of a composer. But in that case, I said, oh, first of all, the quality is amazing from the first piano opus to the last. And you can see an amazing progression for the pieces he wrote when he was young to the pieces he wrote in his late years. An incredible progression when you can really follow this man's evolution, the evolution of his philosophy of music, the evolution of his sensitivity, and how he translates it into sounds. In the first pieces, you can hear a bit of influences of Chopin, of Schumann, Mendelssohn. But then, the more he grew up musically, the more he found his very special harmonic language that is so ambiguous. And I think that then I read a lot about Fauré's music, and I read a lot about, like, what musicians think about this music. And the late years of Fauré's music still remain quite misunderstood. There are not so many musicians, pianists, going through these last opuses because it's very demanding, it's very challenging, not only technically, but also to enter this incredibly ambiguous harmonic world. See? Because if you think about the first opuses of Fauré, you have like something that makes you think about things that you already know. Like, this is very gentle, and maybe you can relate this to pieces you already know from Schumann. But if you go with the late opuses, the last nocturne, for example, this is something you probably never heard. Maybe you know the piece, because this piece is one of the few that was played. Horowitz played it, actually. At the end of his life, he wanted to perform more Fauré. We would have loved to listen to the Fauré played by Horowitz. But you see how Fauré moved from this very gentle, romantic conception of the piano music to these strange, crawling harmonies that invite us in an inner world with nightmares, with dreams, and all this created by these harmonic combinations that for which he had a special secret. My process of working with this music was, I would say, staying close to the first impression I got, to the discovery impression. I wanted it to be fresh. I didn't want to know the music too much. I wanted also to discover it more through the process of recording it. I know it might sound a bit weird, like maybe amateurish, I don't know, but this is my way of working. I had a similar approach with Scarlatti a few years ago. I fell in love with this music, but I also wanted to lock myself in the studio to really enter this world. And most of the things I found them while recording. That's why I take a lot of time to record. I don't like to be in a rush, because it's not only about like recording things that I know, that I played thousands of times. Most of the things I recorded, I never played in concert. And I learned it. I learned the music solidly, but keeping enough freedom and flexibility to find the right shape, considering that I'm recording on this wonderful Paolello Opus 102 piano in this studio. I wanted it to be really like a sculpture of sound with the Fauré music, like going through the opuses one after the other and finding a kind of dramatic line from the beginning to the end. And so it would be like, for the listener listening to this recording, feel closer to the composer, hopefully, following him, like in his 50 years of creating work, and maybe get closer to his doubts as a composer, to his dreams, to his attempts to create his own musical language. And I didn't want this, this complete works recording to be like an anthology or something like monumental, like a monument to Fauré. I wanted it to be an adventure, a journey, and that the listener can feel invited in this, like feel closer to this music and feel the evolution of it. That's why also I decided to put the pieces in a chronological order, so you can really feel the progression. When you listen to the first CD with the pieces he wrote when he was young, to the last CD when he was over like more than 70 years old. And then you can ideally listen to the whole thing as one dramatic line, like summing up 50 years of his creative work. That was my idea.